Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the webinar today. Today, we are going to be discussing how AI is transforming technology hiring as we know it, and I am joining this discussion with three esteemed guests. But before I introduce them to kick off the discussion, I just want to go over our agenda today and a few housekeeping items. We plan to take up about 45 minutes, including 30 minutes dedicated to a fireside chat around the topic, as well as 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. So please share your questions in the chat window. The webinar today is being recorded, and we will be sending out the recording tomorrow via email. And lastly, this webinar is part two in a three-part series. Our part one to the discussion last month focused on hearing from engineering leaders from Okta and Glean. And today's part two session is focused on hearing from talent acquisition leaders, which is two sides of the same coin. We'll be sending you the invitation to the final part three of our series, and I'll share the link for that at the end of this webinar. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our guests, Jocelyn Lai, who is Global Head of Talent Acquisition at Duolingo, Chad McRae, who is VP of Talent Acquisition at Tinder, and Elena Stefanopoulos, who is Director of Recruiting at Labelbox. Welcome, Jocelyn, Chad, and Elena. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So to level set the discussion, AI and tech hiring is a pretty loaded topic, and I think it's something that's on everyone's mind these days. So we are packing up the discussion into two parts. First, we're going to focus on how our TA leaders here are using AI and automation in their recruiting operations. And the second part will focus on hiring AI talent specifically. So to start off, let's talk about AI and automation in recruiting and interviewing. And I'm going to start this one, Jocelyn, with you, but I would love to hear from everybody. The first question is, how does your organization currently leverage AI and automation in your recruiting practices? Can you share some specific examples of how these technologies have been implemented and the results that you've seen so far?
Yeah, so we've actually been using AI for quite some time. I think it's just getting a little bit more hype now, and we're all getting more familiar with it. So one very common one that we've been using for quite some time is Textio. So we use it to build inclusive job descriptions, make sure they're gender neutral. So it provides you suggestions for specific words to use. That's one example of AI that we've used for many years. How we are using AI in a different way is we have we now use ChatGPT. We actually have access to 4, and we actually use that to help write interview questions. So it's like, hey, we value these things. What type of interview questions should we develop? Or we use it to sometimes, if we get stuck on how should we write this one bullet point in a job description, now we can ask ChatGPT for some help. So now we use AI in terms of just like helping us shortcut some of the more laborious, like copy intense tasks.
Very cool, and in an innovative way, I think, to leverage those technologies, particularly GPT-4. Very interesting. Elena, how about yourself?
Yeah, so for us, we've started to slowly add in our tech stack any sort of AI-based tools. So obviously through filtering and making sure it works for us. But mainly scheduling has been a big help for us. So we're using Modern Loop and honestly highly recommend it. And then we also use a tool for interview training and coaching called BrightHire. And that helps us with training new interviewers, but also coaching existing ones just to make sure we're always, offering that great candidate experience. And then very similar to Jocelyn, we use ChatGPT for any sort of like text heavy or project based, any sort of maybe we need a structure for a presentation or a structure for a competency framework or anything that has to, could help with a little bit of, copy text, wherever we need to keep consistent tone across the board. That's a very helpful tool for us.
Very cool. And Chad, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, just like this group here, we've been adding to our tech stack since late 2018. So we use AI and automation throughout our recruiting funnel, from sourcing to initial screening. So for example, we use a tool that's AI-driven called Eightfold, which uses large language models to scan resumes to ensure that we're reaching out to the right people. It also looks at self-identified diversity data, so it's not doing visual ID, which is amazing for us. And then lastly, it actually updates the ATS. So if a candidate applied 5 years ago, it updates them with their current employer. So none of the data in our ATS is old. We use Textio just like Jocelyn as well. It's been amazing. We've seen a lot of shift in the way that we attract candidates. And then lastly, we are also using GoodTime, which is an AI-driven scheduling tool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I think another one that's been fairly common out there to help along the line, similarly to Textio, is Grammarly, which I'm sure many of your folks may have seen or used in the past. And it definitely strikes me that there are a bunch of really interesting companies that are popping up that are leveraging these, particularly these large language model technologies like GPT, ChatGPT, GPT-3, GPT-4. And I can imagine that we are only going to be seeing more of that happening as things continue to expand at a pretty rapid pace, like we've seen over the last year or so in this space. And I think that brings up a really interesting question, particularly for the recruiting space, which is so fundamentally a human, sort of interaction space. And the question at the center of that is really, how do you strike a balance between AI and the sort of fundamental human element in recruiting, hiring today? What role does the human play? What role does the AI play? And how do we continue to make sure that candidates have that great personal experience? And Chad, why don't we start with you on this one?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics in regards to AI and human connection. So really, when you think of humans, we're really hardwired to connect, but we also are in a world where we rely on increasingly temporary relationships and connections, which needs swift coordination. So you think of TA, we're managing multiple candidates all at once. There's a professor at University of Michigan named Jane Dutton, and she talks about this a lot. It's called HQCs, which is really around high quality connections. It gives a sense of vitality. You feel known and respected in that communication. And you also have a mutuality and positive regard. So this helps create psychological safety and build trust within the process. So while AI does provide efficiency, I still strongly feel the human touch is irreplaceable, especially looking at culture add to your organization, values fit, and soft skills. You still need that human making that final decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Ellen, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of thinking the same way about this. The way we see humans is really in the loop. So, we can leverage AI to do all of these, maybe a little bit more boring stuff and like admin stuff and things that we don't really want to do, or, our energy and time can be spent elsewhere. Mainly, I would say in thinking about the bigger picture, making sure we do offer that great candidate experience through every touch point. And so I really see AI more as a tool to make humans more impactful in what they do. And that can be applied to talent acquisition, to honestly pretty much everything. So it's really, again, I think about it as a tool. However people want to use it, that's what they're going to get out of it. So that's kind of my mantra there.
That's great. And Jocelyn, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think about it very similarly. So if I tie back to kind of foundational management skills, we want to fill our weaknesses with something so that our strengths can shine. That's kind of how we think about AI, right? Recruiters are really good at building relationships. They don't have to be great copywriters. They don't have to be wonderful at concisely writing a job description. So guess what? That's what AI can do. So I tend to, in my mind, think about it when it comes to information management, information creation, that's AI. When it comes to building experiences, that is where the human still comes into play. So for our team, there's like, what defines a great experience for a candidate? It's, are they well informed? Are they well prepared? And did they have a fun experience? AI can help with the first two. AI has a lot of trouble with the last one. And that's where the magic of Duolingo and our employees comes out. And it goes to what Chad was saying with HQCs of you can't replicate that, the deep connection there.
Yeah, that's a really great observation. I one of the things that I think a lot about when I think about this particular space, and I definitely didn't come up with this, but I can't remember where I heard it, so I can't remember where to give credit. But when it comes to things like AI, particularly in human-driven processes, the best ethos that I've heard there is let the computers do what the computers can do so that the humans can spend the time doing the things that only the humans can do well. And that seems to me to be very relevant in this particular space, where there are lots of things right now that I bet your recruiters and sourcers are spending a lot of time doing, those administrative tasks, scheduling, poring over resumes, or managing calendars, or those types of things, that there are maybe things that software could do better, that would allow them to spend the bulk of their time, identifying with candidates, spending time with them, understanding where the strengths are, getting the right people into the processes. So I can imagine that we are going to see more and more tooling and software built to help with that particular sort of side of things. And, sort of along those same lines, I think one of the questions that is going to be at the top of minds for a lot of TA leaders, as well as HR leaders as well, is the risk versus reward of these particular technologies, particularly right now when we are, I think, simultaneously in the infancy of a lot of these newer technologies, but we are seeing adoption and transformation and expansion of the capabilities of these tools happen just so rapidly. I mean, we're less than a year right now from when GPT or ChatGPT was originally released in Q4 of 2022. I would love to hear your thoughts on how you're thinking about balancing the risks and rewards there. So, Elena, how about yourself?
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind is interviewing. So we've actually had to adapt very quickly to the existence of ChatGPT and also candidates using it in the interview process. So specifically for engineering roles, obviously we are in the heart of it all. So for us to say don't use ChatGPT would have been a little bit hypocritical. So we didn't want to do that. And so we had to find a way to balance it. And so what we did was to train our interviewers to know how to interview with this new technology in place. Some candidates use it, some don't, but the principle is still the same. So we really had to think, kind of first principle approach. What is important to us? What are we trying to get out of these interviews, and what's the best way to do it? And it was really kind of coming back to interviewing fundamentals, asking follow-up questions, paying attention to what the candidate is saying, how they're thinking about it, really digging into their thought process, not necessarily only their output. And so by doing that, it really put us in a position where it was pretty intense for a few days because we had to figure it out so quickly. But then after that, we were like, okay, this is working. So it was a good experiment, turned out to kind of put us ahead in like this whole conversation of how are we using AI, how is it impacting our recruiting process. So we were able to say, yeah, it's okay. Like we know how to do this. We can work with it. It's working for us. So we can incorporate it in our workflows. So that was that was one thing that kind of comes to mind when you're talking about that.
It does seem like iteration and experimentation and some trial and error is going to be a part of the strategy here, no matter what, particularly this early on in the deployment of some of these tools. Chad, I'd love to hear
absolutely.
what your thoughts. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Chad, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well on sort of risk versus reward.
Yeah, just like Elena said, that it is very evident that it creates efficiency and scalability. Like there's no way that we could be doing all the work we are doing without having our sidekick of AI. But we are really cautious about over-reliance. One challenge that you have within AI is the potential for algorithmic bias. We haven't been able to remove bias from humans. So the large language models are only as good as the content that's put into it. So we continue looking at refining the models. We keep the decision made by humans, and this helps mitigate some of the risks that we have within AI as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I bet if we surveyed our respective companies' general counsels, one of the things at the top of all their minds right now is going to be the impact of AI biases in hiring and all people processes. And it certainly is an ever evolving landscape as it comes to regulation and the legislation in this particular space. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that evolves. And Jocelyn, would love to hear your thoughts around risks and rewards in this space as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest risk is, I think we're quite clear on the rewards. In terms of the risks, I think it's actually much more introspective for each organization, which is it really forces all of us to say, what do we value? I think it's so distracting where we all open up our emails, our social feeds, and suddenly there are like all these AI companies, and then suddenly everyone's becoming an AI company. So we were actually pressured ourselves to ask ourselves, are we an AI company? And our answer was no, we are a learning company. And guess what? That's okay. So I think that is actually the biggest risk right now is when it seems like everyone around you is becoming an AI company. Remembering like who you actually are, which now I'm just getting like Mufasa vibes. But I do think that's a good thing to keep in mind.
I love that. And it's interesting. One of the things that this sort of AI revolution that has sparked over the course of the last year really reminds me of is, if you dial the clock back just, about maybe 12, 13 years ago, when the mobile computing revolution came through, right? And we had the advent of the iPhone and then Android and then mass adoption of these technologies. Suddenly everybody needed mobile engineers, but was everybody a mobile company? No, but you needed to have a presence, in mobile, and you needed to make sure that you were delivering on a compelling mobile experience for those candidates. And that actually brings me to the next area that I wanted to cover, which was AI and machine learning talent. This seems to be an extremely hot space right now in terms of talent, and one that is rapidly becoming extremely competitive. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you are approaching recruiting and evaluating and onboarding that type of talent with your respective organizations. And Jocelyn, let's start with you.
Sure. It actually hasn't changed too much for us. Part of it is that we're quite lucky in that we always had AI from the beginning. We were built on AI. That's how we've been able to scale our product. The only thing we've had to keep a closer eye on is I think there are a lot of AI engineers who now want to build AI for the sake of AI. And what's really clear at Duolingo is we don't build shiny objects for ourselves. We build it for our learners. So are we wanting to implement AI for our learners to support our mission? So we've had to really just make sure the intent there is correct. Because what really brings us together at Duolingo is we all believe in the mission. We show up in different ways, but we all believe in the mission. So that we've had to lean a bit more on. But in terms of what we vet for technically, it's the same. We still value people who have published research, who have strong coding skills, who work well collaboratively.
Very cool. Yeah, and I mean, and I think your answer there is another really good reminder of how important it is to keep humans at the center of the process. That's a very human decision to make sure that everyone is really centered on the mission and sort of not getting going off into left field just because there's something that might be new and very interesting from a technology standpoint to explore. Chad, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Obviously, the algorithm has been at the center of Tinder's product from the very beginning. We'd love to hear your thoughts on how you all think about AI and ML talent.
Yeah. First, some fun facts about Tinder. We've had, since 11 years of being founded, we've had 75 billion total matches, and we have 3 billion matches a day. So it's just substantial data that we have as well. And our chief product officer recently announced, based off of our market research, we understand a third of our members on Tinder would absolutely use generative AI to create better profiles and better connections. So that's why when we shift to looking at our talent and what we hire in, we have to make sure, as Jocelyn said, that they're not just interested in building the shiny new product, but actually still bringing in that authenticity that is needed within dating apps. And that's going to be very key. So when we think of AI talent, yes, it's machine learning and data scientists, but our marketers, our product managers, our product marketing people, our HR team, our communications team all need to be understanding AI.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I do think one of the things that is really interesting about this space is going to be the opportunity that it provides to make so many different types of functions more efficient, more effective, and again, let the humans focus on the things that only the humans can do. Let the machines do the things that they can do well. Elena, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this one as well.
Yeah, I think for us, it's a little bit interesting because we have overlap AI with our product, what do we do and what we hire for. So Labelbox is a data-centric platform for building intelligent application. So our whole thing is to enable breakthroughs for our customers, and we have customers across all of the different industries. So it's not really about the shiny thing for us. Very similar, right? Like, remember what you are and like what you do. But it is important for us to be able to build a product that further supports AI development for our customers. And so that level of talent is interesting for us. What really translates in recruiting, like what we're looking for, is more of that, autonomy, creativity, research, kind of always wanting to stay on top of what's happening in the industry, but also sometimes defining what's happening in the industry. So it's always at the forefront of AI development. And really, that translates into seniority most of the times, which is an interesting challenge that we're working towards right now, or through, I should say. But very similar to Chad said, everybody in our company has to understand and be able to operate in this very technical space. And so even our salespeople, our CSMs, our recruiters, like, they are all pretty technical. It's not only about the engineering talent that we bring on board, but it's also pretty much everyone else to be able to create this company. So it's been an interesting kind of leveling exercise that we've done, not from a seniority perspective on this one, but more on like, what is the technical bar that we need across the board at Labelbox. So it's it's an interesting challenge, especially for roles that are perceived to be non-technical, because we want them to be slightly technical. So
But yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm reminded of that phrase, software is eating the world. And I think, tools like large language models and ChatGPT and other tools like that they really do have the opportunity to step in and have a positive impact on the way lots of roles are performed, and the efficiency and effectiveness of folks across lots of different disciplines. But it is definitely the case that we are in uncharted waters at this point. And I think the only thing for certain is this technology is going to continue to expand what it's going to be able to do. The impact is going to expand. And it's going to be a very interesting ride to see where it all goes. Okay, well, we have covered a lot of ground in the conversation so far, and I want to make sure that we give our audience a chance to ask a few questions. So we'll go into some Q&A from the audience here. And I'm actually going to start with one that was referenced a little bit earlier in the conversation, which was around the use of tools like ChatGPT in interviews. I would love to hear from each of you on what is your company policy around candidates using ChatGPT in interviews. Do you view that as cheating? Do you look at that as an opportunity to integrate this new technology into your interview process? What are your thoughts in this particular space? And Chad, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, I wouldn't. So AI, like, to me, like, I've heard about all these companies banning ChatGPT. Why are you banning it? Candidates are using it. So it's very important that you have an even playing field there. In regards to candidates using ChatGPT, it would be cheating if they're using it during the interview process and entering in their technical question and answering it verbatim. But I think candidates using the tool to prep is very important on that. What we've done at Tinder as well, we've created an AI risk forum with Tinder and Match Group that looks at the risks and rewards of AI across our portfolio of brands.
Very cool. And Elena, how about at Labelbox? Are you all sort of leaning into ChatGPT? What's your approach so far?
yeah, definitely embracing it. As I was saying earlier, we've made it, we had to embrace it, really. There was no other way. And so with knowing how people are using it, how candidates are using it in the process, and making sure our interviewers are prepared for that, for whatever situation, I think we're in a good place to be, flexible to every candidate's kind of, it's almost like a learning preference at this point. Some are more visual, some are more text heavy. ChatGPT can definitely fulfill that text heavy preference and reading about it, about different things. So even if they use it in the interview process, even if it's at the technical phone screen, our interviewers are prepared to work with that. And so it's been working for us to have it, to just welcome it.
Very cool. And Jocelyn, what about Duolingo?
Yeah, for us, we thought we would see ChatGPT show up in candidates during their interviews, but we haven't. And so my hypothesis here is we are quite well known for, we hire people and we interview people for technical craft. People want to join Duolingo because they're like, hey, I'm really nerdy about this thing and I want to apply it. So in a way, I think people go into our interviews being like, hey, I want to show off how good I am at designing XYZ or coding XYZ. So in a way, they don't want to use ChatGPT. But let's say a candidate were to somehow use it, we would ask them not to, because we do value that technical craft as part of our hiring philosophy.
Got it. Very cool. Another question is, how do you balance the potential that AI brings to recruiting with concerns around things like candidate privacy, candidate experience, protecting company IP, and the like? And Johnson, why don't I go back to you and see what your thoughts are on privacy, candidate experience, and so forth?
Yeah, privacy stuff, we haven't really had to broach that. In terms of candidate experience, we lean really hard on our TA folks creating that human touch. And then what was the other piece that you mentioned?
Like your company IP and those types of things.
Yes. So because we have access to GPT-4, we're very much like, okay, make sure you use GPT-4. We can't leak anything out to the world, so please don't use the other ones. So we're quite stringent on that, and everyone's been understanding and followed that.
Chad, how about yourself?
Yeah, Jocelyn, you have me laughing there. Is same as us. Like we make sure that it's ChatGPT-4. We're not putting any confidential information within the large language models that can help train it. So that's what we're doing as well. Is just making sure that it's ChatGPT-4.
Yeah.
Elena, anything on this one from your standpoint?
I would say same on that part. And then on the candidate privacy, and we do have policies in place to make sure we stay on top of any requests that come in, or periodically we assess what needs to be deleted, what needs to be kept, what can be kept, what should be deleted. So really staying on top of that and making sure we're in alignment with all of the data privacy requirements across the US, but also Europe, because we have presence in multiple countries. So yeah, it's always a good partnership with our legal department there.
Yeah, I do think it's going to be a bit of a game of whack-a-mole, trying to make sure that companies stay in compliance with the regulations as they evolve. Certainly with with GDPR and New York's AEDT law, CCPA in California, it can be really challenging to understand what is in compliance and what is out of compliance. It's going to be a very interesting time, I think, for heads of HR and general counsels around the world for the next little while, until some of these things become a little more sorted out. And I'm sure none of us wants to be the court case that becomes the precedent setter on any of these things. One more question from the audience is, can you provide more details on how you've automated the recruitment process for your roles? What tools have you used? What areas of the process have you maybe cut out or optimized? I think we've touched on a few of these things throughout, but Elena, anything in particular on this one that you might want to touch on?
Yeah, I'm thinking of at our whole process and how it kind of evolved with the different tools, and yeah, maybe our workflow has been influenced a little bit. So for example, I mentioned we created a whole career framework so we mapped out all of the roles in our company. I did that selfishly, very honestly, because that really helps with recruiting and having those scorecards already. So it's really connecting the dots between that candidate experience and that employee experience. And that has been done with obviously mostly ChatGPT, but then that enabled our recruiting ops manager to be able to open roles, for example, in the ATS a lot quicker, because we already have the scorecards, we already have the competencies that we're using, or we're looking for that particular role. We already have the questions. So everything kind of flows very quickly from there. And then the recruiters are supported with this admin piece, and then they can just focus on the sourcing part, and in the candidate experience. Further down the line, we do, I think scheduling was probably the biggest lift that we've automated, and that freed up a lot of my team. And then the interviewer training, that's kind of in the background. So yeah.
Very cool. And Jocelyn, I think you mentioned a few tools, Textio and others. Are there other parts of your process that you're using some interesting tooling, or are you looking at ways that you can optimize the recruiting process in light of the sort of advancement in the AI space?
Yeah, so we've used they used to be called Interview Schedule, and now they're called Prelude. They've been acquired by Calendly. It's quite similar to Chad. You mentioned Good Time. So that's been a huge help because from the very beginning of building our TA team out, we said scheduling coordination is like the soul-sucking part of TA that no one likes, but we need to make it delightful. So how do we do it? Let's use tools. So that's been wonderful. The stage that we're at now is, yes, there's still stuff we can automate. For example, we use Greenhouse and we just automated a Slack integration where you can get notified anytime someone moves the stage. But I also truly believe that sometimes we forget quality, and understanding what that bar looks like is actually even more efficient than just automation. So one example is how we approach sourcing. We are 750 people. Our TA team is 24 people. We have a part-time sourcer who's contract, and that's it. Most companies have a sourcing army, but the reason why we're able to just use a few hours is because we really lean in hard on what does great look like from a candidate profile. And that actually saves way more time, and we don't need to hire FTEs because of that. So I always kind of pressure tested of, do we need automation to solve it, or do we need to better calibrate on what quality looks like?
Very cool. And Chad, how about yourself and Tinder?
Yeah, we've done a lot of work on building out our leadership competencies and our core and functional competencies across every skill set that we hire at Tinder and Match Group. So with all that, we've had to build out robust interview panels. We have robust questions. So what we're looking at in addition is, how do we allow the panel members and the hiring managers show up on a Zoom and be present? Right now, there's a lot of note-taking and scrambling and taking notes. So we want to be able to look at tooling that might be able to create scripts from the interview process, and then utilizing that to put into our scorecards.
That's great. And just before we wrap up here, I'm gonna bring one question from myself for each of you, which is, if you had a crystal ball and you had one wish for how AI could impact the space of recruiting and talent acquisition as we look forward, say over the course of the next 2 to 5 years, what do you hope to see from this technology in terms of ways that it can positively impact the TA space? And Jocelyn, I'll start with you.
Sure. This one is a hard one for me to answer because it's double-edged. So so what I envision is some AI tool that can Duolingofy our communication. The reason I mention that is I truly believe talent brand is becoming more and more important, which means recruiters have to be content marketers. But what's really hard is teaching a recruiter how to write copy in a specific tone of voice. So AI could help us with that. The challenge there is then we intrinsically do not build up that skill set. And I think in a way that's actually a really important skill set for a recruiter to develop over time. So it's us versus time, but that would be my wish.
I love that. That's great. Chad, how about yourself?
Yeah, I say with the world moving more to skills-based recruiting and hiring, I think one thing that will be important with AI tooling for the future is the profile of a recruiter is going to change. It's going to shift. The entry-level roles are going to shift substantially. So really what you're going to have to hire for is EQ to be able to use that tooling and understand how to manipulate some of the data sets. So for me, I look forward to talent teams with strong EQ that can deliver great candidate experiences and can automate a lot of the administrative burden that we've had in talent. I've started in talent 20 years ago, and I used to get fax resumes and newspaper postings. So it's just really interesting to see the pivot and the shift. So in my 20 years, I think in 20 years from now, it's going to be completely different.
I'm having flashbacks to to the late 90s and early 20s and fax machines, and not everybody having internet at home. Wow, yeah, just absolutely took me back there for a second. That sounds great. Elena, how about yourself to close this out?
I would probably want to look a little bit in the shorter term, and my wish would be for something to really help me connect the dots between all of the different tools that exist. I think this has been one of the biggest challenge from the recruiting ops side, is to really figure out what works for us, what we should be signing on, and obviously, the whole conversation around for how long. I feel like now it's kind of becoming impossible to sign more than 2 years agreements with any tools because everything changes so quickly. So yeah, if I were to have like a wish from that crystal ball, I would say maybe tell me what my tech stack should be without going through that whole tedious process. But it's a journey. So I think, yeah, we have a lot of options. There's definitely something for everyone and for every use case. The challenge really becomes like what works for us, for my team, for my company, for what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the only constant is change. Well, that is it for today. I want to say thank you so much to all of our speakers for joining us. This was a really fun conversation. Thank you for sharing your time and your thoughts and your expertise with us. A very special thank you to everyone in the audience. Please don't forget that we have part 3 of our series coming up in October. So before you go, don't forget to sign up for that. I'm looking forward to seeing you all again next month. Please have a great rest of your day, everyone, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks so much.